So right now, if you're a Nintendo fan, it's of course an exciting time because you do have some games to look forward to still for the end of the year. We've got a brand new 2D Zelda game coming with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. You've got a new Mario Party game with Super Mario Party Jamboree, and also Mario and Luigi Brothership, which is the return of the Mario and Luigi games after almost a decade. So there's still some good stuff to look forward to, but of course, a lot of people are also very excited knowing that Nintendo's next generation system with the Nintendo Switch 2 is just around the corner. So Nintendo's global president, Mr. Shuntaro Furukawa, already confirmed earlier this year in May that the successor to the Nintendo Switch is being worked on at Nintendo, and they do plan on revealing the system for everyone before the end of Nintendo's fiscal year, which is ending in March of 2025. And while obviously Nintendo has been working on the system for years, it is a very exciting time now because they're definitely getting ready to put on their finishing touches here and everything as they're getting ready for the full unveiling and then starting the hype cycle and promotional cycle for a brand new generation. And we might have a little taste of some of the measures that Nintendo is taking for how they're going to go about the launch of the system, and this is actually coming right from Nintendo's own executives and the global president, Mr. Furukawa. So this was revealed inside of the Nintendo shareholders meeting, which happened a few weeks ago. And there's some interesting details here about how they're going about with the launch of this brand new system, but even some of the ideas that they might be taking into the software and new games that could be coming out for that system as well. So one of the things that was asked here by the investors was, I would like to know about the countermeasures against the reselling of the successor to the Nintendo Switch. At last year's general shareholders meeting, you said that you would prevent resale by ensuring the production of a sufficient volume of hardware. How are these efforts coming? And to that, Furukawa gave a response here by saying, we believe the most important countermeasure against reselling is to produce enough units to meet demand. This thinking has not changed since last year. In addition, we are taking account circumstances in each region and considering what measures can be taken within the limits permitted by law. Last year and the year before, we were unable to produce Nintendo Switch hardware in sufficient quantities due to the semiconductor shortage. That situation has now been resolved. As for the successor to the Nintendo Switch, at present we do not think that shortages of components will significantly affect production. And so of course this is about preventing shortages for the Nintendo Switch 2 and preventing people from buying a bunch of these and then reselling them to try to make a profit, because that was a huge issue that happened with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. When those systems came out, they were of course limited in how many were able to be produced because it was just very difficult with the chip shortage and everything happening at the time, and it was just so awful to try to get one of these systems. If you wanted one, you had to like stay up at night at like 3 a.m. like looking on different websites, and then bots would try to take them and put them into everyone's carts, and like it was a whole mess, and it was just very difficult, and a lot of people were trying to buy these systems and then sell them for like $1,000 more to try to make more money off of them. It was a mess, and I feel like for the most part Nintendo has been pretty good with like not having shortages for their systems. I think the worst one that I can remember was honestly the original Wii, where I know when that came out, like it was very difficult from like around I think like 2007ish to 2010 to try to get a Wii, and it was just very difficult finding one. And I remember in my neighborhood there was just one kid who was like one of my friends who had a Wii, and he was basically the most popular kid in the neighborhood because everybody would just go over his house to play his Wii because everybody just wanted to play those Wii games and nobody else could be able to like get a Wii even if they wanted one. I'm really hoping that Nintendo doesn't have anything like that happen with the Switch 2. I feel like even when the original Switch came out, it was a little difficult. Like I remember hearing some stories about people who wanted to get a Switch in like March 2017 and they weren't able to because they were sold out, but I'm pretty sure like once the next month like they had like a big batch that came out when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe released, after that it was pretty easy to find Switches. So I feel like the best timeline here would be like the day that the Switch 2 comes out, anybody can just walk into like a Best Buy or a Walmart or wherever and you can just see Switch 2s on the shelf and everybody who wants one is able to get one. So I am really hoping that they are really taking this into consideration and everybody who does want a Switch 2 day one, because I know for sure I'm going to try to do whatever I can to get that system day one. I'm really hoping that anybody who does want to get it immediately is able to get a pre-order, and it's just very easy and seamless. So it is nice to hear that Nintendo is taking these types of things into consideration. The next thing here is one of the investors said, it was announced that the hardware sales forecast for the current fiscal year does not include the successor to the Nintendo Switch. However, I believe that the full year earnings forecast will be greatly affected by a successor system or a major software release. I would like to hear your thoughts on the need to announce the company's full year earnings forecast. And Furukawa replied to this by saying, when we announce our financial results at the end of each fiscal year, we also announce our full year financial forecast for the new fiscal year. We know that investors are very interested in these forecasts. Our basic policy for IR activities is to disclose information to shareholders and investors in a fair, timely, and appropriate manner. However, in our business, it is important to surprise our consumers in a positive way. Sharing specific product information such as sales strategies in advance would diminish the surprise. For that reason, we are often unable to disclose such information when announcing our earnings forecast, and we find it challenging to announce earnings forecasts at that stage. On the other hand, we also think that we need to communicate our business outlook to shareholders and investors as much as possible, so we believe it is appropriate to announce our full year earnings forecast, at least for now. Previously, we also announced the interim earnings forecast, but we will no longer disclose those since even the slightest difference in the timing of a software can significantly change those numbers. We will continue to consider ways to better communicate our shareholders and our investors. Now, this is something I actually really respect from Nintendo because they're basically talking about here how they know that like really big announcements like having a huge game that's going to bring them a lot of sales or like a new system can definitely change kind of like their earnings forecast and how much money they expect to earn, but it also is going to like sacrifice a surprise if they tell investors like exactly how much they feel like they're going to make because of announcements that they already know about which are on the way. And because of that, they're basically saying here that they're not going to sacrifice kind of the surprise with their fans and surprising them with like big reveals and stuff inside of Nintendo Directs and things like that, just to tell investors like a more accurate kind of representation of how much money they feel that they're going to make. And that's definitely, I feel like, the best way to do it. Like, obviously, I know like investors and shareholders and all of that are important to Nintendo, but at the end of the day, your fans are of course going to be your biggest customers. And so spoiling like big announcements and reveals that are coming just to be able to give a more accurate number and stuff to investors and shareholders, I'm glad that Nintendo is still putting fans forward in terms of that sense, because we all love getting surprised with like big reveals that nobody thought would happen. Now, someone also asked about the pricing for the Switch 2, where they said here, I would like to know about how the weakening of the yen is affecting product prices. If you consider the current market exchange rate, there is a large difference between the sales price for the Nintendo Switch OLED model in Japan and the US. I am concerned that if the yen continues to depreciate at the time the successor system is launched, setting the price in each region based on the current market exchange rate would make it less affordable for people in Japan. Have you considered adjusting the sales prices for specific regions? And to that, Furukawa replied here by saying, the yen has depreciated since the release of the Nintendo Switch, and it is true that there is a price difference between the hardware in Japan and elsewhere. Currently, we cannot provide any information about the launch timing or pricing strategy for the successor system. In addition, we are not currently considering a price change for Nintendo Switch. However, it is true that the yen has depreciated over the long term, so we will consider this issue carefully as we monitor the situation going forward. So of course he wasn't going to tell us the official pricing of the Switch 2, but I do wonder how they're going to go about this because the value of the yen is of course depreciating in Japan. So when the Switch 2 does come out probably at some point next year, I wonder like if they're going to take into consideration how much the value of it is going to be worth and then kind of adjusting that with the pricing for that system in different areas of the world. Because I know for the Switch right now, it seems like you get pretty much like the value of that system. Like when it first came out, it was like pretty much kind of straightforward, like the value made sense for every region, but for some things, like it definitely was a little bit weird. Like the Nintendo Switch Lite, I'm pretty sure, in like Europe, it is way more expensive for Europeans than it is for anybody who buys it in like the US. And I didn't even know about this until one of my friends told me. But like here, you can get a Nintendo Switch Lite for $199.99, so like $200. But apparently in like the UK, it was like our equivalent of like $250. And like in the US, if you spend that much, like at that point you can just spend $50 more and get an entire normal Nintendo Switch. So I didn't know it was so weird like that in European countries and stuff. So I wonder if they're gonna like go about it and try to make it better for the Switch 2. Hopefully they do that. I'm expecting it to be kind of like $400 in the US, so it'll probably be like kind of around that range, I would say, in like other parts of the world as well. Now we might also have an idea for what Nintendo's software strategy could be like moving into the Switch 2 generation, as we've got Miyamoto here who said, Miyamoto says that Nintendo aims to have 130+ million seller every 3 to 5 years. And so this was from an interview that happened a little while ago, but basically here they were chiming in the interview by saying, when Miyamoto-san is working on a project, he can assess it on a scale like this one can aim for 30 million copies, or this one will probably sell about 480,000 copies. It's not that he knows it clearly, but he has has to think of it on that scale. So basically, this is talking about how Nintendo is able to make like their kind of forecast for how they feel like a game is going to sell, and I'm sure that has to also do with like how much they're putting into the budget for the game, because if they know that they can make more money back, then they're probably going to try to make the game have a more ambitious budget and stuff. So that does make a lot of sense, but it's really how they're talking about here how there's going to be 130 plus million seller every 3 to 5 years. And I mean, if we take a look right here, we can see kind of like the best popular selling games that are on the Nintendo Switch right now, where we've got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is the most popular, where it's almost at 62 million, which is ridiculous. Then we've got Animal Crossing New Horizons at about 45 million. We've got Super Smash Bros. Ultimate at 30 million. We got Breath of the Wild with close to 32 million, Super Mario Odyssey at 28 million, Pokemon Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet at about 26 and 24 million, and then we've got like Super Mario Party here, Tears of the Kingdom, and we've also got New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. And so taking a look right here, we can kind of see that these types of games that appear here at the very top of a system are pretty much like Mario Karts, Animal Crossing, Smash Bros, Zeldas with like 3D Zelda games, 3D Mario games, a brand new generation of Pokemon. These are kind of the types of games that we have here. And so going back to what Miyamoto is basically saying here with how they're expecting a game for Nintendo to have like 30 plus million sales, they're expecting that to happen every 3 to 5 years. And so, I mean, if we take a look right here, I mean, this kind of seems like it does make sense. Mario Kart, of course, came out like the first year that the Switch came out in 2017, but this is also kind of a port of a Wii U game, so it's a little different. I'm assuming he's talking about like brand new, complete, like from the ground up projects, which they would want to have like a 3 to 5 year space to try to have like those types of games coming out on a system. So, I mean, if we take a look, like Animal Crossing came out in 2020, Smash Ultimate came out in 2018, so that is about like a 2-year gap between these games. Breath of the Wild came out in 2017, so it was only a year gap between Ultimate and Breath of the Wild. But then we've also had Mario Odyssey, which came out in 2017 as well. So of course, with that year, the launch year of the Switch was very important for them, but Pokemon generations are usually about 3 years apart anyway. Mario parties are usually about like a few years apart. Like we had Superstars come out in 2021, and now we're getting Jamboree coming out this year, which is 3 years after, so it's about 3 years apart for that as well. And then also 2D Marios, I mean, we pretty much only get one 2D Mario on a system, and we just got Mario Wonder last year, but you can kind of see here the types of games that they have. Like these are the ones that really sell very high, so maybe this can kind of give you an idea for like when to expect like a Smash Bros on the Switch 2, and then expecting a brand new Mario Kart, and then expecting a brand new Animal Crossing and a brand new 3D Zelda, because these are of course going to be like the best selling games even on the next system, but they have to space out like exactly when these games are going to be releasing to make it kind of better for their entire sales and everything. So it's nice to see them kind of talk a little bit about that strategy, but also how they kind of feel about what they feel like each game is going to sell, because I think that that's also very important. We've got this quote right here, or like this tweet from Stealth here, saying that Nintendo basically said that they were very happy with Pikmin 4 sales being 3.5 million. And I mean, for a lot of companies, that's very surprising, because 3.5 million for a lot of companies can be able to be like enough to shut down a studio, because if they were expecting like a system or like a game to sell like 10 million copies and then it only sold 3.5 million, that can be detrimental. And I think it's good that Nintendo is able to have these types of expectations where they know like for a Pikmin game, it's not going to be selling gangbusters. You're not going to have like 15 million copies sold and everybody getting a system to buy and play Pikmin 4. But it's nice that they don't have to worry about like if this game only sells 3.5 million, that they have to like shut down studios and lay off people or anything like that, and then have to like kind of get rid of developers because that game was a flop. So it's nice that Nintendo does have realistic expectations for stuff like this, and I'm sure with the Switch audience and having so many people playing Switch games, it's only going to grow moving to the Switch 2 as well. And a lot of like franchises were really able to thrive on the Nintendo Switch with like Xenoblade and Fire Emblem and these types of series that really weren't like insanely popular before. And so yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely be sure to click that like button and also subscribe to the channel, as well as I'm definitely gonna have some more videos talking about the next Nintendo system as the information comes out. So definitely be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Comment down below and let me know what you guys think about this. How do you guys feel about these statements that Mr. Furukawa here is talking about with having like shortages for the Switch 2, and then also how they're going about with the pricing and everything? And how do you feel about Miyamoto's strategy with like how Nintendo tries to have one like 30 million plus seller every 3 to 5 years? Do you guys think that that's appropriate? Do you think it makes a lot of sense? What do you feel about everything? Definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know. But if you don't have anything to say about this, just comment your favorite emoji down below for some engagement. I would really appreciate it. go follow me on Twitter at actual Aero so it can be featured in videos, and also join my Discord server as well. We've got a bunch of people in there who are always talking about Pokemon and Smash Bros and Nintendo, so definitely be sure to join that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.